You think the opinions of other people are protecting you? They are the cage. Watch yourself for one ordinary day and you'll see it. Before you speak, you check the room. Before you move, you read the faces. You wait for the small nod from someone else before you trust the thing you already knew was true. And you've told yourself a flattering story about this, that a careful man listens, that a smart man reads the crowd, that keeping people's approval is just how you stay safe. But look at what that story actually built. It built a life where you cannot act until strangers agree. It built a version of you that flinches before it moves. And if you are trying to make anything real, company, a body of work, a family, a name that outlasts you, you cannot afford to be steered by the glance of people who will forget you by the weekend. So say the thing plainly, because you never have. The approval you chase to feel safe is the exact thing holding you in place. Walls you thought were guarding you are the ones keeping you small. All this time you have treated the crowd's opinion as a shield. And all this time it has been a set of bars. There is no tidy solution hiding in that sentence. There is only the uncomfortable recognition, sharp and overdue, that you have been outsourcing the one thing that was always supposed to be yours. Now, before you take this the wrong way, let me draw a hard line around what this is not. Not caring what they think is not coldness. It is not contempt. And it is definitely not the hollow performance of the man who loudly announces how little he needs anyone, which is just approval-seeking wearing a leather jacket. The lone wolf who tells you he answers to no one is lying, usually to himself. And he is more enslaved to the audience than you are, because now he has to keep proving his indifference to stay believed. Reject that version completely. It's not what we are doing here. What we are doing is quieter and far harder. It is the recovery of your own judgment as the seat of your life. It is taking back the authority to decide whether the thing you made is good. Authority you never should have loaned out in the first place. That is the whole move. Not to stop feeling. To stop being governed. And here is where the strangest teacher in history walks in. Marcus Aurelius was not a hard man in a cave. He was the Emperor of Rome, the single most powerful human being alive, ruler of the known world, a man who could have commanded any opinion he wanted and had it delivered by morning. If anyone had earned the right to stop worrying about what people thought, it was him. Yet, at night, on military campaign, by lamplight, he sat and wrote to himself about this exact battle. He fought the pull of other men's opinions in private, in a notebook no one was ever meant to read. Sit with that. The strongest man in the world still had to train himself not to look sideways. Which means this is not some private weakness in you to be ashamed of. It is the human condition itself. And the fact that even he had to drill against it is proof that it can be drilled. Here is the idea that carries the whole thing. In his notebook, the collection we now call the Meditations, Book 6, Passage 51, in Gregory Hayes's translation, Marcus writes, "Ambition means tying your well-being to what other people say or do. Self-indulgence means tying it to the things that happen to you. Sanity means tying it to your own actions. Read that twice, because it is doing more than it looks like. He is not attacking ambition. He is diagnosing where you anchored it. He lays out 3 places a man can bolt down his well-being: to the mouths of others, the accidents of fortune, or to his own conduct. And he calls only the 3rd one sanity. Sanity. Not sainthood, not toughness. Sanity. As if living with your center of gravity parked inside other people's opinions were a kind of quiet madness, a low fever you've simply stopped noticing. And when you look honestly, that's exactly what it is. Because when you care what they think, here is what has actually happened. You have relocated your center of gravity out of your own chest and into a stranger's throat. Your peace now lives in someone else's mood. Your sense of whether today was a good day waits on a reply that may never come from a person who was barely paying attention. You have moved out of your own house and taken up residence in the opinions of people who do not think about you at all. If you are trying to build something, this is the load-bearing wall. Get it wrong, and everything above it eventually comes down. Your work has a standard. That standard has to be yours, set by what the thing is actually for, by whether it is true, whether it is well made, whether it serves. It cannot be set by the mood of the room on the day you happen to show it. Rooms are weather. Standard is the ground. Tie your well-being to your own actions, the quality of what you make and how you conduct yourself in the making. And you become, in his word, sane. Tie it to the applause, and you have handed the definition of your one good life to a jury that never even asked for the job. Marcus pressed on this until he found something almost comic underneath it. In Book 12, Passage 4, he writes, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own. Stop and feel the shape of that, because it is genuinely absurd. You love yourself more than you love any of them. You would step in front of a car for your own life before a stranger's. Yet you have somehow arranged your inner world so that your own considered judgment, the judgment of the person you love most, the one human being you have known your entire life, counts for less than the half-second reaction of someone who glanced at you and moved on. You trust the stranger's flicker over your own deliberation. You overrule the person who has sat with the problem for months in favor of the person who saw it for 4 seconds. Said out loud, no one alive would defend it. Lived quietly, it runs the whole show. And now make it concrete, because this isn't a theory. It's your week. There was the thing you made and did not publish, because you had already heard in advance the one comment that might sting. There was the ask you softened until it asked for almost nothing, so no one could accuse you of wanting too much. There was the standard you quietly lowered, the edge you sanded off the idea, the bolder version of the plan you traded for the safer one, all so that a room full of people you will never meet again would give you a nod you won't even remember by Friday. Now count what that has already cost you. Not in some final reckoning at the end of your life. This week. The work that never shipped. The truth you did not say. The version of you that stayed folded up small so that strangers could stay comfortable. You have been paying a tax in the currency of your own life to a government you never voted for. And the maddening part, the part Marcus could not stop turning over in the dark, is that you are the one who keeps signing the check. That check is the reason this channel exists. If you are building something real, and you want a steady voice that keeps handing you back your own judgment when the noise gets loud, subscribe and stay a while. No hype, no performance, just a hand back to your own center whenever the crowd pulls you off it. That's the whole offer. Now, let's get you the tools, because recognizing the cage is not the same as walking out of it. To understand why this particular man is worth trusting, you have to understand what the Meditations actually is. Between roughly AD 161 and 180, Marcus Aurelius ruled the Roman Empire at its height, the most powerful position on earth, with the whole world's opinion trained on him like a lamp. And during those years, mostly while on campaign at the frozen edges of the empire, with plague moving through his legions and war grinding on outside his tent, he kept a private notebook. Not a book, not a speech, not a treatise built to instruct anyone. He wrote to no one but himself. Reminders, corrections, arguments he was having with his own mind at 2 a.m. The pages were never meant for your eyes, or anyone's. Later ages gave the collection a fitting name: To Himself. Let that reframe the whole thing. The most powerful man alive did not spend his private hours writing lectures, telling other people to care less about opinion. He spent them disciplining his own mind. He was not performing Stoicism for an audience. There was no audience. He was doing the work on himself, in the dark, where no one could ever applaud him for it. That is the authenticity you are leaning on when you take his advice. He is not selling you anything. You are reading a strong man's private training log. And because we are staying honest here, one correction that matters. The single most famous line attributed to Marcus Aurelius on the internet: "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He almost certainly never wrote in those words. It's a modern paraphrase, a clean collage that doesn't map onto any single passage in the actual text. So set the pretty quote down, but do not throw away the idea underneath it, because the idea is genuinely his, threaded all through the real meditations, the line between what is yours to govern and what is not, and the strength that comes from knowing which is which. Keep the truth, just don't put invented words in a dead man's mouth to get there. If we're going to reclaim our own judgment, we can start by being honest about the sources. Now, why is this so hard? If it's this obviously absurd to hand strangers your verdict, why can't you just stop? Because the wiring is older than you, older than reason, older than Rome. For almost the entire span of human existence, you lived in a small band, and that band was the whole world. Food came through it. Safety came through it. Mates, status, meaning, protection at night. All of it came through the group. And exiled from the group was not an inconvenience. It was a death sentence. A human alone on the ancient plane did not last a season. So the brain learned to treat disapproval as a mortal threat, to read a frown as the first tremor of banishment, to feel the group going cold as a wind before winter. That circuitry is still in you, fully intact, unpatched, running underneath every decision you make. When you feel that lurch of dread at the thought of someone thinking less of you, that is not cowardice. That is a survival instinct doing precisely the job it was engineered for, roughly 10,000 years too late. So start by taking the shame off the table entirely. You are not weak for feeling the pull. You are a human being running ancient software in a world that software was never written for. But here is the turn, and it changes everything. The tribe that could actually kill you is gone. The strangers whose opinion now trips that ancient alarm cannot exile you. They cannot starve you. They cannot end you. And for anyone trying to build something, here is the whole distortion compressed into a single line. The modern tribe is an audience of strangers whose approval costs you nothing to lose and everything to chase. Your nervous system is treating a comment section like a council of elders, deciding whether you get to eat this winter. It isn't. It never was. Which means the work ahead is not to hate yourself for the feeling. The feeling will always show up. The work is to retrain the response, to stand next to that old alarm and teach it, patiently, that this particular fire is not a fire at all. So let's make it usable, starting today, with a practice you can run inside any single moment. In Book 4, Passage 18, Marcus describes the peace available to the man who stops watching everyone else and attends only to his own conduct. who, in his phrase, runs straight along his own line so that it may be just and pure. That's the drill, right there. When the flinch comes, the urge to check, to soften, to go fishing for the nod, you stop and you ask one question. Is this my action or their opinion of my action? That's the whole cut. Two categories, and only two. Your conduct, which is yours to govern. Their verdict, which is not. Because in the heat of the moment, those two things feel like one thing, and they never are. Whether you did the work well is your department. Whether they clapped for it is theirs. Marcus's image for the free man is that he does not look around to see what his neighbor says or does or thinks, but attends only to what he himself does. That it be just and pure, and then runs straight along his own line without glancing sideways. Straight along your own line. Not swerving every time a face in the crowd shifts. Here is the worked version, the one you actually face. You finish the thing. The piece, the pitch, the product, the post. In the old pattern, the instant it goes out, you're already refreshing, already scanning for reactions, already handing the next hour of your inner life over to whatever numbers come back. Run the drill instead. Shipping the work. That's your action. Done, and done to your standard. Their reactions. That's their opinion. Not your department. Not your line. So you close the tab. You turn back to the next piece of work. You let the verdict land wherever it lands while you keep running straight. Do this once, and it feels unnatural, even a little cold. Do it 100 times, and you are physically rebuilding, rep by rep, the muscle that keeps your center of gravity inside your own chest, where it was always supposed to live. But be careful right here, because this is the exact spot where men fall off the far side and curdle into the caricature. I don't care what anyone thinks is not the goal. That's the lone wolf trap again, and it's just as broken as caring about everyone. The truth is more precise and more demanding. You do not stop caring about all judgment. You choose whose judgment is allowed to weigh. Before Marcus let anyone's opinion press on him, he made himself ask a quiet, cutting question. Whose souls do I actually respect? Book 8, passage 53, he goes at it directly. You want praise, he says, from people who kick themselves every 15 minutes. The approval of people who despise themselves. So why would you bleed for the verdict of a judge who can't even approve of his own life? Audit the bench. You are going to be judged no matter what you do. That was never up for debate. The only real question is by whom? And you get to answer it. So build a small, real council. A handful of people who are also building something. People who hold actual standards, who have done the hard thing you're attempting, or something close to it, and who love you enough to tell you the truth when the truth is unwelcome. Their opinion, you keep. You seek it out on purpose. You let it sharpen you. That's not weakness. That is how every serious person who has ever lived got better at anything. And then, with the same deliberateness, you discard the rest. The verdict of the man who has never once attempted what you are attempting does not get a vote. The reaction of the crowd that risks nothing, builds nothing, and forgets everything by morning does not get to set your standard. This is not going deaf. Deafness is the coward's shortcut. This is discernment. The far harder discipline of keeping your ears wide open and your judgment sovereign, of hearing everything and being ruled by almost none of it. Choose your judges, answer to them fully, and let all the rest be weather. There is the third practice, and it's the one that dissolves the fear at the root instead of just managing it. The Stoics called it premeditation, the deliberate rehearsal of the very thing you dread, played all the way through to its actual end. You don't run from the disapproval. You walk straight into it, in your mind, and you follow it past the flinch to what really happens on the other side. So ask it plainly. If they think less of you, if the comment lands, if the room goes cool, if the criticism is public and sharp and unfair, then what is the actual, literal, physical consequence? Follow it, not the feeling, the events. And almost every single time, when you trace it past the dread and out into the real outcome, you arrive at the same unremarkable place. Nothing you cannot survive. A worse mood for an afternoon. A story you told yourself that turned out not to be true. The sun, still up. The work, still sitting there, still needing to be done. Marcus did this constantly, and not with small things. He rehearsed loss. He rehearsed betrayal, failure, the death of the people he loved, his own death. Not to be morbid, but to walk right up to the feared thing and stand next to it until it shrank down to its real size. Fear inflates everything it touches. Premeditation quietly lets the air back out. And the fear of other people's judgment is the most inflated thing of all, precisely because you never actually finish the thought. You feel the first cold spike of it, and you retreat. So in your mind, the disapproval stays enormous, shapeless, a shadow with no floor and no edges. It grows in the dark because you refuse to look at it. So give it a floor. Pre-live the criticism in full until it loses its charge. Play the worst version all the way to its end, and then keep watching. Past the sting, past the bad night, to the ordinary Tuesday on the far side of it, where you are still standing, and the thing you built is still standing next to you. Do that, and something quiet and permanent shifts underneath you. The fear of what they might think stops being the thing that makes your decisions. You do. That is the whole point of the exercise, to move the author of your life back inside your own skin. Now the turn that changes the entire meaning of everything we've said, because if you stop here, you'll have gotten it only half right. The half-right version is genuinely dangerous. Escaping other people's opinions is not the destination. It was never the point. It is only the clearing of the runway. Freedom from the crowd's verdict is not some finish line you cross and then relax behind. It is a space you open up so that something can finally take off from it. And here is where a shallow reading turns poisonous, so hear this clearly. Freedom from approval is not freedom from obligation. This is the precise spot where the whole idea gets hijacked into nihilism. Nothing matters, no one's opinion counts, so do whatever you want and feel nothing about any of it. That is not what Marcus found. And it is not where a single word of this leads, because look at what he actually did with his freedom. The most powerful man in the world, who had trained himself clean out of needing anyone's approval. Did he use that liberty to indulge himself, to withdraw, to serve nothing but his own comfort? He did the exact opposite. He picked up the single heaviest duty a human being can carry, and he carried it for 2 decades through war and plague and grief and betrayal, until the day it finally killed him. He did not stop caring what people thought so that he could care about nothing. Stopped caring what they thought so that he could serve what he owed. Without flinching every time the crowd disapproved of the hard, right, unpopular thing. That is the entire point of owning your own mind. Not to spend it on yourself, to spend it on something worthy. The work only you can make. The people you are responsible for. the standard only you are willing to hold, when holding it costs you the applause. Man ruled by opinion cannot do his duty, for a simple reason. Duty regularly requires you to disappoint people. The whole reason to reclaim your judgment is so that when the right thing and the popular thing part ways, and sooner or later they always do, you are actually free to follow the right one. You are not clearing the runway so the plane can sit prettily in the sun. You are clearing it so it can carry something heavy, somewhere that matters. Free the mind, yes. Then put it to work on what actually deserves it. And if you don't, if you leave the steering wheel in other people's hands for another decade, then understand plainly what that costs, without drama, because the plain truth is sober enough on its own. A man who never reclaims his own judgment spends his one and only life building something exquisitely optimized for a jury he never chose and never even liked. Every decision shaded a little toward approval. Every edge filed down to avoid a single frown. Every year, another small, silent surrender. So gradual that he never once feels the exact moment he gives himself away. And it works, in its own way. He pleases the room. He offends no one. He collects the nods, year after year after year. And then, one day, the building is finished, and he steps back to look at what he made, and the horror is quiet and total. He pleased everyone and became no one. There is no self anywhere in the thing. He spent the whole life auditioning for an audience that had already wandered off, performing for people who forgot his name years ago, and there is nothing at the center of any of it that was ever actually his. Now hold the other man up beside him, the one who took his judgment back. Be honest about his life, too. It isn't free. He will be misunderstood, probably for years. He'll be called arrogant for having a standard, difficult for holding a line, foolish for building the thing before the crowd agreed it should exist. He won't get the easy nods. He traded those away on purpose with his eyes open. But when he steps back at the end and looks at what he made, it is unmistakably his. Every choice in it traceable straight back to his own conviction. The work carries his actual fingerprints, and not the smeared, averaged-out consensus of 1,000 people who were barely watching anyway. Both men die. Both are forgotten by the crowd. Because the crowd forgets absolutely everyone. That's the one thing you can count on it for. But only one of them built something that was ever truly theirs to leave behind. Choose now which of those two men lays down his work at the end. Come back with me to where we started. To the cage. You thought the walls were built out of other people. Their opinions, their frowns, the cool of a room, the comment you lay awake dreading. But look again now, honestly, at the lock. It was never the crowd that held you in. The crowd cannot hold anyone. It is weather. It moves on. It forgets by morning. What held you was your own permission. You were the one who kept treating their glance as a verdict you were obligated to obey. You built the walls out of borrowed opinion, brick by brick, and then you handed yourself the key and somehow forgot you were holding it. The cage was never locked from the outside. It never was. Which means the way out is not to become harder. It is not to become colder. It is not to stand in the rubble of your own relationships announcing to no one that you need no one. It is quieter than that and far more serious. It is to become answerable, fully, finally, and to only one court. Not to the crowd, no matter how much applause you manage to gather, and no matter how far you run from it. To the one judge you can never escape, yourself, and the work you leave standing behind you when you go. That judge sits down with you at the very end, alone, after every crowd has scattered, and every last opinion has guttered out like a candle passed from one dying hand to the next, until it finally goes dark. And that judge asks you exactly one question. Not, did they approve? Never that. Only this. Was it good? And was it yours? So stop asking the room for permission to build your own life. It was always yours to build. Pick up the key. You've been holding it this whole time, and get back to the work that only you can make.